Isaiah's name means the Lord saves, and that's really the central message of his book. So what I try to show in this Knowing the Bible volume on Isaiah is this central emphasis on God's grace for sinners. The book opens with a very dark picture of sin and judgment. God's people, Israel, have rejected God. They've failed in their calling to love God and love others, and because of that, God will judge them. And as we read through the book of Isaiah, we find that it's not just Israel that has this problem. All nations do. So really, this is a problem for all of us. And yet, right when it seems hopeless, Isaiah shows us that God enters and gives promises of hope and grace and blessing and restoration. And so throughout the book, as we read, there's a continual alternation between dark notes of judgment and bright notes of grace. And by the time we get to Isaiah chapter 40, the tone of grace becomes dominant. So God announces, "Comfort, comfort my people," in Isaiah 40. He announces that he's going to return to his people as the king. He's going to forgive their sins. He's going to restore them to himself. And what we find is that this blessing extends not just to Israel, but to all nations. And Isaiah also shows us that God's plan of blessing and salvation does not just stop with saved individuals, but it climaxes in what Isaiah calls a new creation. He talks about a new heavens and a new earth that's going to come. So we step back and see all this and we ask the question, how is it possible for a God like the one Isaiah shows us, a holy God, to give this kind of blessing to a sinful world like ours? And when we ask that question, we find that Isaiah has a clear answer, and the answer is in one whom he calls the servant. The servant is one who will come to live the righteous and perfect life of servanthood that God's people and really all of us have failed to live. And yet this servant suffers. Isaiah tells us that he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. And we find out why. Isaiah says he was wounded so that we may be healed. So this servant receives the judgment that everyone deserves so that we can receive the blessing that he deserves. And what I try to show throughout this volume on Isaiah is that Jesus Christ is this servant. Jesus Christ has arrived into history to restore people to God and forgive their sins and to bring in this new creation. And we find that he does it through his righteous life, his sufferings on the cross, and his resurrection to glory. And so my hope is that as we study the book of Isaiah carefully and closely, we will see Jesus as the glorious, righteous, and suffering servant, and that we would put our trust and hope in him.